must constantly look at things in a different way.
The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast was created by two physical therapists out of the desire to learn more about the different educational roles in physical therapy and healthcare, and how healthcare education works by talking with educational leaders and people with different perspectives within physical therapy and across interdisciplinary lines on how education can be improved to disrupt the status quo of healthcare education. This is our journey, and thanks for listening. Are you a third-year physical therapy student that excels on tests when you have study guides, checklists, and deadlines? With all of the information available about how to prepare for the NPTE, it's easy to get disorganized and not feel prepared going into the big day. NPTE Prep Success is an online course that provides PT students easy-to-use study guides and step-by-step guidance through the NPTE preparation. To learn more, visit kylericeprep.com. Thank you again all for your continued support, and now for the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, F. Scott Field, and tonight we have on a very special guest, longtime supporter of the show, but first-time guest, the lovely and talented Dr. Becky Bliss. We're going to discuss a very important topic for those interested in pursuing a terminal degree. Tonight, we discuss the Mount Olympus that is the dissertation process. Having just recently completed my educational doctorate, or EDD, that whole dissertation process, and with Becky recently completing her Doctor of Health Science, or DHSC, we figured it'd be good to talk about the process of the dissertation from start to finish for some of those considering maybe an EDD or a DSC or a PhD. Becky, first off, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and for all of your support in the past. Could you start off by telling our audience a little bit about your academic journey and how it led you to where you are today?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. After 15 years of clinical practice, I made the leap into higher education because of the need for a change. I was working as a clinic manager in an outpatient clinic, and the focus on metrics and revenues and visits per eval and revenue per visit didn't lead to very much satisfaction at the end of the day. I was running metrics in the evenings after I went home, and I had lost sight a little bit of why I originally started my journey as a physical therapist. So my love and what excited me was teaching students that I took regularly. So I went from a one student in the clinic environment to 40 plus in the classroom. And I truly feel like I am able to make a small difference for the future of the PT practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish I could say that I knew what I wanted to do with my EDD and which direction I was heading, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. So tell me a little bit about what led you to pursue your DHSC.
So 6 months after starting as a full-time faculty, CAPTE's requirements changed, and that's when they instilled that they were going to start enforcing the 50% terminal academic degree. And program chair got announced it at a faculty meeting, and everyone kind of looked around knowing that we weren't in compliance and who was going to jump aboard and start a program. So I started investigating terminal degree programs. My main focus was searching for one that would give me skills to be a better educator. I knew I was a great clinician, and I taught really great clinical skills, but I didn't have that foundational knowledge in the science of teaching and learning. And so I went about it. It took me about a year to go through. I can't tell you how many phone calls I had with programs, PhD programs. I even had an interview with a PhD program. And then in talking to the EDDs as well as the DSCs or the DHSCs. And ultimately it came down to the best fit for what I was looking for. And the program that I ultimately chose was really great. It focused 50% on science of teaching and learning and 50% on scientific inquiry. So both of the areas that I really felt like I needed continued mentorship in with a leadership thread throughout. So I thought it was the best of all worlds in that respect.
I wish I had some sort of direction as far as how I stumbled into my program, my EDD. I was at St. Augustine doing the transitional doctorate. The head of the EDD asked me if I wanted to teach at some point, and I said not really. But it was a matter of, hey, some of these classes overlap, so you could cut a 4-year program down to a 3-year program. And then went back and talked to my wife about it and kind of figured that, if things really fall apart and, my back gives out or my knees go out, my hands give out, and I just can't do the clinical stuff anymore and I can't do manual therapy, I could always fall back on teaching. And for me, I think, the EDD made a little bit of sense because I did enjoy education and I did enjoy learning and the process of learning and, the science behind teaching and a lot of the theory that goes into it. So, I figured worst case scenario, I could always teach education. It didn't have to be physical therapy related. And I think that's where I kind of landed on the EDD. But it's interesting that you and I are both here talking about the dissertation process, and neither one of us is a PhD, which I love. But I do have a kind of a personal, selfish question here. But do you get a sense or a feeling that DHSCs or EDDs or DSCs are looked at any differently than PhDs?
I think it depends. It's that answer that we give our students that they absolutely hate, right? It depends on things. But I luckily had an amazing mentor. She was actually my own PT school faculty advisor. And as I was going through the process, I'm like, who can I ask about this? Because I really was weighing, like, I was feeling pressure that the PhD was a better degree, and why would I go any less than that? And not really knowing, but not really feeling like the PhD was the right fit for me, because it was going to give me great research skills and I was going to be an expert in one area of research, the ones that I was looking at least. And it wasn't an educational PhD. It wasn't in curriculum design. It wasn't in, assessment, those types of things. And so I actually emailed her a little bit and said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but 20 years later, and said, this is the decision I'm in academics, and I just don't know what is the best decision. And I really feel the pressure to do a PhD. And she gave me such good sound advice, which helped me make my final decision. And that was, where do you see yourself teaching? Do you want to teach at an R1 institution and go after, NIH grants or grant funding? Or, do you see yourself at a smaller teaching and learning institution where you're still doing research, but maybe not as much on a grand scale? And at that time, I was at a smaller teaching and learning institution, and I couldn't see going anywhere different. So at that time, it was perfect for me to think about the DHSC rather than that PhD. The other thing was the closest PhD program to me in Kansas City at that time was not taking any part-time students. So if it was a commitment, it was quitting my job and going PhD full time. And at that point in time, financially, our family could not sustain that. So that helped make that decision as well.
Yeah, that's a really great breakdown and good thought process behind all that. I like how you kind of broke that down and went through that. So catch us up a little bit. You get into a program, right? You're in this terminal degree program. You've decided which one is best for you. You go through the program. Well, catch us up to speed a little bit. What makes you eligible to even begin the dissertation process now?
The great thing about my program was that from day one, it was laid out exactly what the expectations were, and we were cohort style. So it wasn't a program where you got to pick your classes and kind of piecemeal things together on your timeline. It was cohorts. You can do the 3.5-year program accelerated, or you can do the 5-year program. And so everything was really well laid out. So I knew exactly what courses I had to take in which semesters in order to be eligible for that dissertation process. And so once towards the final semesters of all my required coursework, I had to enroll in a doctoral proposal. So you had to successfully pass research methodology, research design, quantitative, qualitative, statistics, and then really know that you had a good idea. And then at that point in time, you're allowed to enroll into a doctoral proposal course, which was required. And you spend all semester writing the first 3 chapters of a 5-chapter dissertation product. At the end of the course, so you have to have your committee members identified, go back and forth with each chapter. So you write your chapter, as you know, through this process, and then send off your draft of your chapter, wait for some edits, suggestions, start the next one, and go through that process for chapters 1, 2, and 3. And they'd like you to do them separately to make sure everything kind of falls together. And then once all that is secure and your committee feels like you're ready to do your proposal, it could be at the end of that semester, or they actually have a built-in 1-credit research application for those who weren't quite ready yet to carry it over to the next semester if needed. I was able to defend in that semester successfully. And so then you get approval to defend your dissertation proposal. And so then you defend what you're getting ready to deploy essentially in your research endeavors. And then once that is approved, then you submit for your IRB. So everything had to be sound before they even let you think about submitting for the IRB to make sure it wasn't going to go bouncing back and forth. Which is, in hindsight, it was great. It was a little bit stressful for me because I had my defense proposal in early December, and I knew I was going to data collect start of January because I did educational research. Knowing that there's that Christmas break and the IRB takes a break, I was really on a crunch timeline for my IRB submission, and thankfully people were able to work with me, and I let them know it was coming and kind of vetted the process a little bit, so I knew that everything was streamlined.
Yeah, I kind of got stuck in that IRB ping pong a little bit there. My program started out in one direction. Did you have to take like an oral qualification exam before you even started your
dissertation? I did not. That was something different about my program, that I did not have to do that. So I felt very lucky about that. So
we had to take an oral qualification exam to show that we were competent for everything we learned prior to starting the dissertation. Then we were able to start the dissertation. It was broken up into semester 1 was dissertation 1, semester 2 was dissertation 2, 3 and 4, and so on. Well, the problem is, after I had started dissertation 1, after passing my oral qualification exam, the head of the program switched, and the new program brought in the cohort method. And so we were kind of shimmied into that cohort program, and I actually had to repeat semester dissertation 1 or whatever, because I ended up just taking the semester off due to some family issues. So I went back and I really basically started all over again with that cohort system after that. And then, four semesters later, and but my first IRB proposal just got flat out denied. It was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do this. And it was interesting because it was using service-based learning the way that I ended up doing my dissertation on, but I wanted to actually go out in the community and perform like a balance test and teach Berg balance test and timed up and go, some as a balance screen for like a community, an elderly community, as a community service project, and then compare it to maybe the same tests but taught in the classroom. And they just weren't comfortable with it. And so I shut that down and I just went to a survey study instead. And that's what I eventually ended up doing. But yeah, the IRB process, we'll get into that a little bit later, but it was definitely a hectic one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you hit submit, and then you're like, okay, how long are they going to take it to get back? How many edits am I going to have? What suggestions and things like that? And I also did survey-based research and did an online Qualtrics, so the online survey instrument platform. And it was interesting because I had done multiple surveys prior to that in my faculty role. But for this IRB, in order to truly make this survey anonymous, which I had not thought about or nobody had actually proposed this, I actually had to disengage and make sure that I turned off the feature of capturing anybody's IP address, even though, because they saw that as potential being non-anonymous. So, little things like that just you learn along the process. And I never would have thought of that because nobody, in my own institution had actually required that previously.
For sure. So tell us a little bit about what goes into the idea formation process as far as like the initial stages of a dissertation, trying to come up with your research project. How did you go about doing all that?
I kind of wandered. So, where do I start? From the beginning of the program, when they introduced the doctoral project, because we had to my program was hybrid. And so we were required to do once a semester or once a year on in-person, face-to-face, just to kind of like make sure we were meeting people and looking at our potential committee chairs from the institution, things like that, and just going over some of the topics. So from the original get-go, when they were introducing the project, knowing that we would have to do this at the end of the 3 years, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to do some type of concussion research. I'll, look at validity and reliability of an outcome measure that's commonly used that maybe doesn't have good psychometrics yet in that population because we know that that's lacking, or, early intervention. That's one of my big things that I do as well. And then the more we got into the process and the more we got into the research applications and what goes into doing really good, sound scientific research, and looking at my location in the country, which was in very rural, about 40 minutes outside of Charlotte at a very small teaching and learning institution. And seeing that with my capstone mentorship that I had with my entry-level students and the problems with recruitment of individuals, and hearing horror stories about people being stuck in the hamster wheel trying to get their final subjects so that they could get enough subjects, I kind of had a little bit of, I don't know if I really want to do this. Maybe I should switch. And it was actually at CSM of 2018. I was in one of the educational sessions of the Academy of PT Education. And it was, Creighton's group and Fru's from Creighton, and they were talking about, and then there was instructors from Colorado, and they were talking about how they were utilizing their rubric for clinical reasoning that they had developed. And so they would have the lab practical happen. They were showing videos, and right after the lab practical, they asked the students, so how do you think it went? Tell me about these things using their clinical reasoning rubric. And it was very interesting because the students stumbled and said, well, I think it went great, because they thought they passed, right? So they were like, great, if I passed, that's all that matters at that point. And so this goes on, and they presented, and I was like, wow, this is really, good stuff. And at the end of the session, when the presenters take questions, a student stood up and got to the mic and said, all of this is great, and I can see why you're trying this and asking students to reflect on their own performances. But I can honestly say, no one has ever taught me or told me what goes into good reflection. And it was this big aha moment to me that was like, oh my gosh, the student is saying, you have me reflecting all throughout school, but no one's ever taught me how to reflect, and it hasn't been intentionally designed. And so he even said, I think that's probably the problem that you're having with today's learners, is that we never were taught. We were always told we did a good job, and oh great, you did a great job, but not saying like, how would you do it differently, or what could you have done better? And so absolutely huge to me. So I left there saying, I think this is the topic that I really want.
Well, and ironically enough, reflection is one of the things that separates experts from novices, especially in the PT field.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there.
So I started, I went back and then started looking at what devices or tools or outcome measures are out there so that we could measure the ability to self-reflect change in DPT students. What's been done before? Am I, coming up with something novel? Or is this something that, has already been done and I'm just spinning my wheels? And so in looking, there really wasn't any validated measure that looked at change based on educational pedagogies or methodologies. And so I came across a scale that was called the Self-Reflection and Insight Scale. And it was developed by Dr. Anthony Grant in Australia. He's at the University of Sydney. And I was like, well, I might as well look him up and see if I can use it. So I literally looked his email address and I was like, hey, Dr. Grant, I'm a physical therapist and, went into all of this. I'm getting ready for my dissertation process and I would really like to utilize your tool. I don't even think, and I know that there's a big time change difference across, the ocean, but I had an immediate response from him. And he literally was like, absolutely, you have free access to use whatever. He sent me all the versions, PDF, words, scoring sheets, all the different subscales and how to calculate them. And then also shared a folder of every publication related to the self-reflection and insight scale. So I literally had a big part of my literature review sent to me by the creator of the SRIS. And so that was absolutely great. And from there, it just kind of took off. Like, okay, what do we know about reflection? What's the importance of it? Going and diving deeper and just literally, I think, doing searches every day to build my literature review folder.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I used the teaching perspective inventory for part of my study. And the tough part there was we had some questions on the data that they had been collecting through the many years. And the creator of the scale had actually passed away. So, it was really hard to get the information and the data I was looking for because his partner, who had been running it and kind of taking it over, didn't know a lot of the backstory. He was just kind of picking up in the middle and was like, I don't know, this is what he had. Does this help you any? And I was like, oh my goodness. So that was definitely an interesting a twist in things. But so you've got your idea now, right? Can you tell us a little bit about writing your proposal and the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB as we referred to it earlier, and that process, what that kind of looks like?
Absolutely. The first part of the writing proposal requires, so knowing that there was that doctoral proposal course that was going to assist me along this, that was embedded in the curriculum, requires you to find committee members. And so the chair had to be a faculty from the University of Indianapolis. That's where I did my program. And so that was easy. My DHSC program director was like, absolutely, I've got the perfect person with you. It's actually the program director for the entry-level DPT program, Sarah Schultes, which was great. And so we started communicating via email. We had never met in person, but thankfully, as during the doctoral proposal process, ELC happened, and we were both at ELC. And so we actually got to have coffee and really talk about things, which was great to meet her face to face, because everything else previously had been electronic communication because it's a hybrid program. And then I needed a statistical analysis expert. And so that was also pretty easygoing. I had been working with a faculty member in pharmacy at the institution that I was at, who I knew would be an awesome choice. He ran everybody's stats for almost everybody in health sciences, had done his PhD in pharmacoeconomics from UNC Charlotte. That was both mixed methodology, so both quantitative and qualitative. Just a really great giving guy. And I was like, okay, and he's one of the movers and shakers. So I was like, okay, if my stats guy is a mover and shaker, we can get this done as well. So at that point, the content expert, on the other hand, took me a little bit. I had sent some emails out to some of my contacts thinking, okay, who is an expert in the field on reflection? And so, I had, or educational research, either one, because I think it would fit the best. And so I had sent an email to a couple of my colleagues, and some of them were like, I've done educational research and I've done, but my strong suit is more pedagogy, not reflection. Or my area of content is IPE, not exactly what you're looking for. And so one of those emails landed me from a colleague at KU Med, who's the program director there, of the entry-level DPT. And he literally was like, Becky, I love your idea. I really don't have the expertise to help you out, but who you should contact is Gail Jensen at Creighton. And I was like, Steve, I can't just, I don't know her. I've never met her. I'm not sure about that. He was like, listen, you're going to be fine. Send her an email. Tell her I referred you. And then I thought she would be a good match. And so I literally cold emailed Gail Jensen, and she responded immediately, was like, I'm excited and interested. Let's set up a phone call. And so I think we were talking in that same week. And she vetted me to make sure that I was, going to stay on track and not somebody who was going to be wandering, and it wasn't going to take multiple years and different things. And she even said to me, she's like, I think I can tell that you've got your stuff together and that this isn't going to be something that's long and drawn out. So absolutely, I will go ahead and sit on your committee. And it was even within that first phone call, as I was talking through my frameworks and what I had come up with, that she literally referenced 3 articles from Medical Teacher on a theoretical framework called the Master Adaptive Learner. And she was like, this is what you're trying to do, and this is the topic, and you need to. And she was like rambling off and citing off, different articles and things in their years. And so I grabbed those articles, getting off the phone with her, and it literally was that missing link of what I was looking for. It was the basis of foundation of the theoretical framework that really supported what I was actually going to do for my educational intervention. I think after all that, things got, pretty easy for a little bit, but then I kind of struggled a little bit with the chapter 3, which is the methodology chapter. There was a lot of revisions back and forth to make sure that it would be okay from that IRB approval side of things. And so my statistical guy, as well as one of the instructors from the program who teaches stats, really helped me kind of go back and forth. And so once we had that, knowing it was going to be a short turnaround, I was very proactive in making sure that people knew my timelines and contacting the IRB chair to let them know that it would be coming and when was the last possible date before Christmas break in order, and what was the typical turnaround and things like that. And so the IRB process was actually not that terrible because I went through such a rigorous feedback back and forth with my committee. So once it was all set, I had the one, like I talked about, the one edit of changing the check the box on the survey to make sure that it was truly anonymous for the IP. But otherwise, they took everything as was, and it was accepted.
Wow, that's amazing. A lot to process there. And I kind of just want to touch on a few points. One, Gail Jensen's been on the show several times, and we just love her. She's a Macmillan lecturer, award winner. She's just, Gail is one of the pinnacles of educational research and expertise, and can't say enough good things about her. You really hit the gold mine with Gail being on your committee. But speaking to that, I think it's very important that people take time to put together their committee. I don't think people realize how important that committee is.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have gotten through my process without my committee. They just dragged me across the finish line, kicking and screaming half the time. But yeah, your committee is very, very important. So definitely a point to just put a check mark next to and a gold star and realize that picking your committee is a very important process. So don't overlook that.
I absolutely would agree. And I think that knowing, the turnaround, what are the expectation times, like my statistical content expert had stuff back to me, I think in less than 24 hours.
Yeah,
He's just one of those movers and a shakers. So for me, that was fantastic. And then I gave, the ultimate goal was like a 2-week window, and it was seamless. And the information and the edits that they gave back to me were so rich, of really having me go deeper into the process and really think about all angles and all aspects of things. So I could not have done it without my committee. And the fact that, Gail took a call from some random person she didn't know and was willing to give her time and her expertise and her knowledge was, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about my committee. And I had people add to the committee a little bit later on. They didn't actually come on, but they helped me with bits and pieces and holes that I had. Because I started out as an English major. And I just thought I was going to be a pretty good writer. This will be no problem. And scientific writing is a whole different beast. Mm-hmm. And they literally turned me from like an English writer to a scientific writer. And that was a process. So mm-hmm. Kudos to them for sculpting me into something I wasn't, for sure.
Yeah.
So next comes the research and implementation process, right? The data collection. What was that like for you?
I think this was the most exciting part for me, checking the box in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Because I had chosen educational research, my intervention was in the classroom of a course I was already going to be teaching, but had changed the methodology to be intentional in order to foster improved self-reflective ability in DPT students. And it was during a adult neuro management course that I taught right before they were going out on clinical rotation. So best time to think about what the importance of self-reflection is on their performance. And so all of my subjects were readily available. They were right sitting in front of me and participated, obviously, voluntarily in a pre or post course survey, along with intentional guided reflective clinical reasoning practices. And so from start to finish, my data collection was complete in 8 weeks. And it ultimately, I think that was the best thing, because I was able to, because I had all the pre-survey data, which was actually looking at their self-reflection and insight scale, but then its correlations and relationships to other non-cognitive traits of metacognition. So we looked at coping self-efficacy, we looked at grit, and then we looked at emotional intelligence. And what relationships did those 3 constructs have to the ability to self-reflect? And so I actually was able to start my data analysis and running my correlations and my multiple regression early. So I was able to do that even before my post-survey results. And so I had a lot of that done. So when the 8 weeks came around, I was able to then just run the pre and the post comparison. So I'm trying to think, mid-March. And then I actually got everything together, put the pedal to the metal, and wrote, and was able to defend in mid-April. So I finished up those chapters 4 and 5 and defended. My program had no idea what to do with me. They had never had this situation where somebody had gone through, I think one person prior to me, and it was because her job was riding on it. She had to complete it, and it was before the cohort style. So she just went crazy and plowed through. But they were like, this is great. You want to go ahead and defend? So actually, typical, they give the time frame for those dissertation, like that doctoral project dissertation credits, to go through the summer and then through December. And I was able to actually graduate this May. So
Yeah, I was gonna say this is not normal for most people.
You
So
may have asked the wrong person to be on the show.
I know, right? Well, no, I'll even us out. I promise, because like I said, I took one semester off for family issues, and then I took another semester, not off, but I had to redo a semester too. So I extended 4 semesters and made it 6. So believe me, it is not that normally that smooth of a process. We just happen to interview brilliant minds on the show. So
I don't know.
for people that are into dissertations and thinking about the process, just realize it is a process. It's 5 chapters of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's hard work, but definitely rewarding at the end. A huge sense of accomplishment for sure, and something that now looking back, I think it did make sense to do for me, and it is something that's going to work out, even though I'm not terribly sure what I want to do yet. I do have some opportunities that have opened to me that I never would have imagined. So far so good, but we're still early on in the process. Becky, if you wouldn't mind, would you talk a little bit about the writing process and really more so the editing process? Because I know I had to edit mine. I can't even count how many times. I just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And there were pretty minute edits that needed to be done all the way right up till submission time. So what was that like for you, the writing and the editing?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. Like I said, I needed the most assistance probably from methodology standpoint in chapter 3. But I think our program or my program that I was in, like, because we had practiced academic writing from day 1 in the program, through everything that they did throughout the process in the cohort, we were actually working on. I remember taking research, I'm trying to think, I think it was called Research Methods, and the book was Research Design. And we actually had to perform a full literature review and then write, like, so we were as if we were writing chapter 2. So we had to do that earlier on, and then we got feedback, and you could submit drafts and you would get feedback. So the way that my program was structured, even with all of our big projects, we did a huge curricular design and assessment project, but they allowed you to submit drafts of each section to gain feedback. So then you were actually getting mentorship in your academic writing before you turned in the final product. And I think that was done intentionally, but I also think that really truly contributed to me developing my academic writing skills throughout the program. So it wasn't this big struggle towards the end. My committee was great about returning edits and fostering. And, even after I did my final defense, Gail was like, well, you need to add this one reference and you need to change this. And I was still doing edits to the finish line, just like you said. And so, making sure all that was done and then submitting and things like that. So there definitely was a lot of little nuances of verbiage and ways to present the information that just was such a learning process. And I think it's already made me better. I wrote 2 abstracts for CSM today. And I remember 2 years ago when I wrote my first abstract for CSM, it took me, I think, 2+ weeks. And then I went out for edits and then it came back, just an abstract if we think about it. But now going through this process, like, I wrote each one in probably about 2 hours today. So, and knocked 2 out. And I was like, you sit back and you reflect and you're like, oh my gosh, I had 2 in a day. This is great, So what the skills that you gain from your terminal program is absolutely, I was able to utilize it immediately throughout my career. And now it's just seamless of what it's prepared me to do.
Yeah, I have never been through a process that is literally dotting the I's and crossing the T's so much. Like you said, there were references that had to be added and things that needed to be changed. And that for me went right up through, submission time. But let's talk a little bit about that, right? So you've got your final edit, you're done, right? You've got approval from your committee. Now you're done, right? No, you still got to defend this thesis, which you've just spent months and months writing and have gotten approval from. It is done. It is complete. And now you have to defend it. So talk a little bit about the defense of your thesis. How did that go?
Yeah, so because of the hybrid program, I actually was able, when I defended my proposal before I started data collection, that was done via Zoom. So that was actually a little bit, I want to say, less threatening in some ways, but the final defense has to be done in person. And so headed out to UND, and it was slightly nerve-wracking, but thankfully I had a really great colleague and dear friend here at my institution that I'm at now, and he literally was like, okay, I want you to practice, and like sent me an email. It was like, here's the invitation to practice. And I was like, okay, that's going to be great. And so first time I practiced with him, it was like a crash and burn. Like I thought I knew my information. I had been living, eating, and breathing it for 8 months. I thought this won't be a problem. But then getting into that scenario, knowing you only have, like I had 30 minutes and then 30 minutes for questions. So it was for a total hour. And to try to be concise enough, yet clear enough to get the everything across was definitely a challenge. So we practiced once, kind of crash and burn. Second time, another colleague, very well-known researcher who has sat on multiple committees, popped in, my original guy, and then there was a student studying in the room, and we were like, hey, you know, you can go. And she's like, I'd like to hear it. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't know if that made it worse or better that I had one of my students, listen to me actually present.
Yeah, that's pressure, right?
My dissertation. I'm like, okay, well, this is good, And so I was able to go through it a second time, and it went much better, but it really helped me catch some of the not clear pictures of my results. So then I went back and I totally flipped the order of how I was going to present my results with pre and post first rather than correlations, because it would actually guided the questions to be things I couldn't answer. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm literally, a week out and I'm making changes on my final presentation. Like that was a little bit nerve-wracking. And so came home, got it all arranged, and then I literally hooked up my computer to our 70-inch big screen TV in the living room. Hubby sat down and my 3 kids, and I presented to an audience who had no idea what I was talking about, right? Like none of them lived the PT world. And that went well. And so cutest thing in the world, my 10-year-old at the end was like, so mom, why did you choose reflection? And so, I actually got to, answer that question as well. So it was super fun. But because I had lived, eaten, breathed the topic and I knew things so well, I really felt like that was helpful too. So I have one of those photographic memories, so I can say, oh, this study showed this and this, that, but it was truly synthesizing things to get it across in a very clear, organized manner that I probably struggled the most with from the oral presentation standpoint.
Yeah, so my program was a little bit different, and because most of it was online, we were actually able to do the final defense via Zoom because my committee was spread from West Coast to East Coast. So timing-wise, it would have been a disaster to try to get everybody in one place at one time. So that was kind of neat. However, still very nerve-wracking, and I think, realistically, I almost think that was the most nerve-wracking thing I've done up till that point. I mean, the oral qualifications was no big deal. The writing portion and the IRB stuff was tough. Getting approval from my committee was great. But then, the defense was really, really nerve-wracking. Same thing, about 30 minutes and then 30 minutes for questions. Had a handful of people sit in on it that were just there along the way to help out and had seen the topic and what I was working on with service-based learning. But I think one of the main topics and main aspects that I thought about and that was taught to me when defending is that you really are the expert in that moment on that topic. Nobody there knows better than you, probably. There's some people that might know a good deal about what you're talking about, but not your topic specifically. So you are literally there to profess your knowledge and defend your thesis, and you are the expert in that moment. And that kind of, put me at ease a little bit to think about, I do know this better than most people in this room right now on this conference call here. So here we go. Here's what I know.
So I know I had all my committee members, and then anybody else that was in the program that wanted to watch the process, they could Zoom in. And then of course my committee chair and then all the instructors from UND were in person. So I had a little bit of both. So there was definitely, some of that as well as far as, the communication piece. So.
All right. So Becky, you finished your thesis. You've defended now successfully. what comes next? Do you go find a job, or do they come looking for you, or do you climb into an abyss and never discuss this awful process again? What happens after you finished your thesis here?
Like I said, I was blessed to be able to secure an entry-level PT job since 2015 in an academic institution or a program. And so the DHSC at UND was a formal mentorship program that truly gave me exactly what I needed to be a better educator and researcher. And so in that being said, recruitment, and I have to say the solicitations for jobs when I think I posted on LinkedIn that I was actually in a terminal academic degree program. And even just the day I posted that I was actually enrolled and with the estimated date of completion, I started getting contacts from headhunters because of the, faculty shortage we've currently got and then the CAPTE standards. And so I am actually about to change faculty positions. And so I am leaving Wingate University and moving to the University of Missouri, where I will be teaching there beginning June 1st. So just a couple weeks. And so since graduating, those solicitations, those types of things have come in, and that wasn't the case with University of Missouri. I have had a long-term standing relationship with their faculty. I used to take their students when I was in the clinic when we lived in Kansas City. And I just always knew, I had an opportunity to apply previously and it just didn't work out for timing. And then it came back around full circle, and absolutely love all of their faculty. Their program does things just a little bit differently. And I always knew that because their students were different. And then after, I got an email that said, hey, we're getting ready to post our neuro position. Would you be interested? Would you consider, I know you haven't been too long in North Carolina, but would you consider moving back to Missouri? And I was like, I want to think about this. And having checked, knowing I was going to check the box on my terminal degree, said, it's definitely worth exploring. And I went out and did my interview, and sitting with them and talking and, just realizing their purpose, their implicit curriculum, at the end of the day, what their goal was, and saying like, yes, just knowing that that was the place that I was supposed to be. So we've got big change coming up. We've, not sold our house here in North Carolina, and I'm probably going to go out for a couple months by myself and start my job, and Bill and the kids will follow. But literally, so I am getting a lot of job offers, but I have settled on one as far as that goes. And I think that holds true for most people that are in degree programs. Like, I've talked a lot to the people in my cohort, and it's the same thing.
Yeah, I kind of had that. Yeah, so when I graduated, I was the only EDD that graduated that day. And so, so I was literally the first one on the stage. I crossed the stage, and then everybody else after me was a different degree. Most of them were DPTs, OTs, stuff like that. So after the graduation ceremony, I literally had 3 heads of programs come up to me that day and ask if I was interested in teaching and if I wanted to, join the program. And I was like, well, I just graduated a few hours ago, so I think I'm going to take my time and figure it out. But yeah, there are opportunities out there for sure. It sounds like, and with the CAPTE recommendations of, 50% terminal degrees and more programs we're launching every year, we're definitely in a shortage. I would say, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I know it's pretty tough nowadays to fill out a decent core faculty with 50%.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, because of all of this and because of just some conversations and people I knew, I actually now have that opportunity to help form some terminally academic degree graduates through the Bellin College DSC program. So I'm actually doing some adjunct teaching with them now as well in curriculum design and development because of my degree. So I think that's a nice little adjunct side gig as well, but it allows me to contribute to the future of PT educators as well.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about it a lot on this show and how, there's just not a great way to transition from a DPT to a terminal degree yet. And we're going to need a lot of help figuring that out in the future if CAPTE wants to continue with the recommendations that they have of 50%, or just in general, if DPTs want to go on and get a terminal degree, we need to find better ways to help them with that. So I think Bellin College is definitely doing some great things. A lot of the 2-year DPT programs are doing some good things. I know we just had 2 students on from Texas Women's University down in Houston there. They have a neat little bridge PhD program. There's a couple of cool programs out there, but there needs to be more than just a couple. I think we're hurting right now, so it'll be cool to see what the next few years brings as far as opportunity for DPTs looking for a terminal degree. One of the things I wanted to go back and talk about a little bit is, if you wouldn't mind, talk about the interview process a little bit. So, you've got this terminal degree, you're out there now, and schools are pulling at you every which way. What does an interview look like for somebody who's just kind of, graduated and looking for teaching positions?
So that's a great question, because I think based on each institution, it's a little bit different. When I came out to Wingate to interview, it was a day-long process, and you are told, here's your schedule, but you also have to prepare a presentation and give a formal presentation. And that presentation could be on your teaching and learning philosophies. It could be on a topic that they know that you're looking at teaching in, what the needs are for the program for entry-level students. And so it was different at Wingate when I interviewed, because I actually delivered a topic that I would be teaching an entry-level PT, but all the faculty were there to observe it, as well as students. So students were able to weigh in and had a little survey, and they got information and reviews from them as well too. And then meeting one-on-one or in small groups of faculty is how it was at Wingate. And then, you meet the dean, and then you have, you meet with HR, and it's a very long, grueling. So by the end of the day, it's hard to form sentences because you talk to so many people, and a lot of the times you answer the same questions multiple times. When I went out to the University of Missouri, similar process in that I came in, and then I met with the search committee and answered their questions, and then did my presentation. But as part of my presentation, I had to do my topic. But then I had to devote 15 minutes on how I would deliver this topic and engage learners in more active learning strategies. So they really wanted to know my pedagogical approaches in the classroom and what I was going to do, and that it wasn't, what that was, which I actually appreciated. I was excited to know that, because that's one of my philosophies, is more of the active learning. We need to get away from passive lecture, as we know the science behind it is not great. And so I was able to do that, and I kind of, brought up the, hey, when we're going to do neuro exam, the students have access to Physio U, and they have opportunities to learn the neuro exam components, and talking about some of the higher level technologies and applications and things, and the fact that, the topic was concussion as part of the TBI series, and that I had not an old patient, but one of my former patients actually Skype in. And I did his case study, and the patient was able to Skype in, and it was tele. So it literally exposed those first, entry-level DPT students to the potential of tele-rehab. And so they got to interact with the patient and hear his story, and then an IPE event as well with physical therapy and athletic training. And so I was able to share all my ideas. And then instead of meeting with pockets of faculty or faculty one-on-one, this was a little intimidating, but we went into the conference room, and every faculty member was there all together. So it was like this round table interview. But from doing a couple interviews in higher education, in my experience, I really liked that, because I was able to see how the faculty interacted together. Was there a lot of over talking? Was there only a few people that said things? Did everybody have a voice at the table? What were their questions? Those types of things. And right there, it was just so nice to see the inner workings of everybody at the same time, because at the previous interview, it was in pockets. So just a little bit different. I think everybody does things a little bit differently. So. Yeah,
for sure. It's just, it's kind of cool to hear the processes that people have gone through and what they've experienced, because, especially for somebody like me, I've got this terminal degree. I've done a little bit of adjunct, professorship for Baylor, and that's been neat, but I've never applied for a full-time faculty position. So I don't even know what to look forward to.
I remember my first application, and they said CV, right? Curriculum vitae. And I was like, okay, I have a resume. How do I get this into like the CV format with the CAPTI? And, this was back in 2015, and it's a steep learning curve going to higher education, they do things very differently. There's a lot more processes, vetting, as well as politics. So that could be a whole nother conversation.
Right. And one of the reasons that I've been so reluctant and hesitant to go into academia is the politics. But, I've been put at ease from a lot of mentors and a lot of people that it's just about finding your right fit and finding, the best fit for you. It's out there. You just have to find it. So, that's kind of good to know that it's not about, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's a matter of you doing your due diligence and talking with people and really networking. I mean, I think the networking has been more key than anything. I've had opportunities, kind of present themselves to me just because of the people I've known, the people I've had on the, we've had on the show, opportunities that have come up where they've needed help or needed somebody to fill in, it's really just about putting yourself out there and seeing, talking to people you respect, talking to your mentors, talking to people who know better and have gone through it, and then kind of putting yourself in the right positions at the right time to hopefully find the good fit. And it sounds like you've done that exactly. So
yes, I'm very excited.
Well, Becky, we'd like to ask all of our guests this one final question. If you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or DHSC or otherwise related, what aspect would you change and how would you change it?
This is, I listen to all the answers because I'm an avid listener of the podcast. And there's definitely, if you think qualitatively, there's some themes out there, which would be interesting. But I think the biggest aha moment for me after completing my terminal degree and then, pairing it with the Center of Excellence, the National Center of Excellence studies that Jensen and her colleagues have done, part 1 and part 2 for reform. And I think what really came out of that is we do not have enough faculty trained in the science of teaching and learning. We need our foundational scientists to teach our anatomies and our pathophysiologies and our physiologies and things. And we definitely need that. And we definitely need our clinical faculty to be able to relate it to what is happening in the current field, right? And teaching all of that. But the whole science of teaching and learning, I can think back to my first course I ever taught as full-time faculty, and God bless those students. I can't believe they actually learned something because I did, after going through my terminal academic degree program, I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe they even passed their boards. What was I thinking? But you just don't know it. And so having that true training in science and teaching and learning, and not everybody needs to have that, but at least some people on faculty that help with curricular design and curricular revision and things that can do some mentorship. And I think it's all about partnerships. It's partnership between terminal academic degree faculty and, the clinical faculty, those that, are, and, everyone comes from different backgrounds, but if, they choose that they're not going to get the terminal degree, which is absolutely fine, we still need those clinical faculty. And it's the partnership and the pairing between that can help out, and that mentorship that is the biggest thing for the future of physical therapy and breaking down those walls.
Yeah, you hit on a very deep and rich topic there that has a lot of layers to it, because we've had Chad Cook on the show before, and he was saying that he loves the EDD for curriculum development and things like that, like you were talking about. So that made me feel pretty good. Like, hey, we can bring value. We look at things differently. We learned how to learn and how to teach. And not everybody needs to do that. But then there's the other elephant in the room. Well, how do we bridge the gap from the tower of academia into the clinical? And I think, exactly what you said, there has to be a level of respect. There has to be a level of partnership and, collaboration when it comes to teaching, research, and clinical work. And so, I think we're working that out now. I think we're finally realizing that we all got to be in the sandbox at the same time, having the same discussions and helping each other out with strengths and weaknesses. And that's going to result in the best possible outcome for students. So I think we're getting there, but I think we still got a long way to go. And I think that's part of the reason that, this podcast exists is because, we knew it wasn't great. But we didn't know the answer. So we figured, let's just have all the experts on and they'll talk about the answers and hopefully we can figure it out at some point.
Right. Absolutely. So no, I couldn't agree more.
Well, Becky, thank you so much for your time and for coming on the show tonight. Where can people reach out to you online or on social media if they have any follow-up questions or just want to chat?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I teach national CEUs on the sport-related concussion too, so I have definitely a very large professional Twitter account. So that Twitter handle is at Bliss DPT. So you can reach me there or by email. So I can give you my email for the show notes or on the website to link to. Just because of the transition between positions, like it will be my personal email, but that's absolutely fine to reach out to.
All right, great. Yeah, we'll put all those in the show notes for all of those listening. Again, Becky, thank you so much for your time and for coming on tonight. Can't wait to see what's in the future for you.
Thanks so much.
Access to healthcare is one of the largest issues facing both providers and patients, as millions of people worldwide lack timely and affordable access to healthcare. Anywhere Healthcare, a telehealth platform, is a simple, low-cost option for providers and patients that eliminates the barriers to access to all kinds of healthcare. To find out more, check out anywhere.healthcare, which is available in our show notes. And if you use the code HET in all caps when you email to sign up, you'll save 25% off the total cost. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.